It was incredible. Like, it was just like a rush of waters, and he was born, like, all in one contraction. I don't really remember how it went down. I had to ask my husband, "Did you catch her? Did I?" Because I know he didn't fall, but how did that even happen? I don't know.
I'm Kayla Heater, follower of Jesus, wife and mother of 6 children, Christian childbirth educator and doula, and your host of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, where we share God-centered birth stories, evidence-based birth education, and our pursuit of surrendering our birth plans to God. Let's get started. Well, welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and I have Karyn with me today.
Her.
Hi, thank you for coming. If you could just take a minute and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family and your life so we can get to know you a little bit.
Absolutely. So I was born in California, raised in the Midwest, Arkansas and Oklahoma. Moved to Virginia when I was 17. My dad worked in Alexandria. So I moved out here with him and took care of him for a little while. But then my husband lived out here, but we were in a sort of a cult Christian group at the time. So even though we lived in a lot of different areas, we were identified with the same group of Christians. And we left that in 2013, but that's another topic altogether. But so I grew up Christian, but more religious than an active faith, I would say. Then my husband and I got married in 2009, so we've been married for 16 years, and we live on an 1880 farmhouse on 5 acres in Richmond, and we love it here. It's absolutely perfect. The Lord answered lots of prayers that we've had for a place with running water. We've got a beautiful creek out back, and we've tried livestock here and there: sheep, cows, chickens, pretty much everything. We are down to just having chickens and a dog right now, and I'm pretty content with that. Because we have 7 kids, but we have 7. My oldest is 14, and my youngest is 2 months. So after leaving the group that we were a part of, I started putting in my own roots of faith in probably 2015 or so. So just a couple years after leaving, we started going to a different church, and the Lord just started growing us from there. Just changing the way we see Him, and yeah.
Beautiful. Well, take us back to 14 years ago. Tell us the story of either the journey to getting pregnant or what was it like getting pregnant for the first time?
So I was a nanny at the time, and I had been a nanny for quite a long time. I was in child development, and I always wanted to be a mother. When I was a nanny, I just really struggled with. I wanted to disciple her. They weren't believers, but I wanted to disciple her, and so I was just really like craving that motherhood time that I knew was coming. But when I got pregnant in the beginning of 2011, I think even before I got pregnant, I was watching like a baby story and reading all the parenting magazines, like the pregnancy ones that the mom, she had those at her house, and she had so many magazines, and everything was very mainstream. And they tell you all the things that you should be afraid of, like the what to expect when you're expecting book. She had that, and I remember feeling like nauseous whenever a baby story would show the like a mother getting an epidural. And so I just instinctively knew that something I didn't want that type of birth. And so I kind of went in feeling really overly prepared for, like, feeling pretty much like, okay, I'm gonna tackle this head on. I'm gonna know everything there is to know. I found all the books that I could find at the library. One of them was called Pushed by Jennifer Block, and that kind of told me all that I needed to know about the modern medical system and maternity care anyway. I didn't want anything to do with that, just based on reading that book. And I got pregnant while I was a nanny. So that was 2011. And I researched everything. I ended up bringing it to my husband, or I asked him if we could have a home birth before I got pregnant. And just based on my own research. And he was just, his mom had 3 C sections. And so it was like the farthest thing from his mind that that would be a good idea. He's not on board with that right away. But I started reading just little bits of the book Pushed to him, and he slowly became a little more soft to it. And then we met some midwives in Northern Virginia because we lived in Stafford at the time. We went up north to like the DC area, and these 2 midwives had to meet the midwives or some sort of gathering in their home. And just for him to be able to hear from them their professional like abilities and stuff, that made him feel more comfortable having a home birth. So that's what we chose to do with our very first. Even though that was not normal for my parents or his parents, that was kind of disconcerting for my mom, especially because she's had six and she didn't have complications, but it just was not, her strength was not in feeling like natural birth was safe or, you know.
So did she have 6 hospital births then?
Yes, and all of them were medicated except the last. She said, "The only reason I didn't get an epidural is because I got there too late and they misunderstood me." So, that was her, pregnancy. I was overly confident. I would say I was very controlling. I wanted to get pregnant, like, right away, and the Lord did allow that. So, I'm thankful that, that wasn't my battle first off, but I just felt like I knew it all, kind of, and I thought that because I was doing everything right, it was gonna be simple, straightforward, and I had gotten it figured out basically on my first. And so when I went to have her, I had set myself up for an expectation of, like, just perfection and ease and all that stuff, and it was nothing like what I thought it was gonna be,
So what was it like then? What was your first labor like?
so I went into labor at midnight, and it was just slow. I don't remember it being, like, excruciating right away. I was just like, "Okay, I can handle this." But then it went on, for 2 days. So I had 42 hours total, and it was back labor
Mm.
because I think her head, was not, or her yeah, I think her head wasn't engaged quite right. So it was really, really painful in my back, and, even though we had done the Bradley method and, my husband was doing counter pressure and all of that, my midwife was exhausted because she had just been to 5 back-to-back births, and so she wasn't really present in the room walking me through it, and I was insecure, I didn't know what to expect, and I just kinda felt unsupported. So, like, my midwife told him, like, my husband, "Just go to bed and relax, and we'll need you later," and so I just felt like I was floundering, maybe because I felt like I had it under control, and then suddenly I was in a whole lot of pain and by myself, but
Wait, so your midwife went to bed and your husband went to bed?
yeah, she napped, like, all day long, and then I don't remember her being with me except towards the end when she was giving me tinctures and castor oil and this and that. It was not my favorite home birth for sure, and I definitely don't think that I, like, would highly recommend that type of midwifery.
Yeah.
She was more midwifey than, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
She wasn't interfering, she just wasn't present and encouraging, so
Yeah. So she was just more so there to, like, make sure you had your baby, but not necessarily to
yeah.
support you.
Yeah, I ended up on my back, pushing, and that was horrible. Like, I was traumatized for a long time. It did not it did my pelvic floor no favors pushing. I don't even remember feeling contractions when they were telling me, like, "Yeah, you're contracting, push," because I was so exhausted that I was forced pushing, and it was not fun. So I was traumatized, and I was like, "I do not wanna get pregnant again," for a long time. But then 9 months later, I got pregnant, and not on purpose. It was one of those things that the Lord kind of shows you that it doesn't really matter what you do when He's got His own plan. You can rest and let Him do that.
Yeah.
So,
So then being pregnant a second time after having that as your first experience, it sounds like you were a bit humbled through that first birth process, with everything that you went through. But also, did you decide to do anything differently in terms of your second labor, in terms of care or plans or anything like that?
so we were still in that same group, and my faith was still very young and immature at that time. So it wasn't like I went full on into, like, I'm going to grow my faith and have that kind of, birth experience. It was very all practicalities. We were planning on moving further south because my husband had switched jobs, and he worked in Richmond, and we were living in Fredericksburg, and so we were going to move halfway in between. Well, during that time, our house was not selling. Only the Lord knows why, except that we were still going to that group, and He didn't allow it to sell. So I tried to get midwives that could go all the way to where we were moving to, and my first midwives didn't go there. So it was just a range thing, like their map.
Right.
That's why I switched. And these 2 midwives were, not believers. They were, I would say, more on, like, the hippie side of midwifery, but they were gentle and they were with me. And, like, the whole meaning of midwife is to be with women. And so that introduced me to a different type of birth keeper that wasn't necessarily there to, like, manipulate things to go forward, but to just encourage the natural process to happen. And they pretty much stayed out of the way, but his was only 5 hours long, my labor for him.
I bet you enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was crazy because my daughter was still nursing. She was only 18 months, and, my midwife had come for an appointment that morning, and I just remember, like, when she was palpating my belly, I was just feeling how uncomfortable it was because it kept triggering contractions, and I was just like, "Maybe I'll call her back." I don't know, because they lived so far away, they were an hour away. She had other appointments in my area at the same time or on the same day, and she's like, "Well, I'm just gonna go to this other appointment and just call me back if you need me." And as soon as she left, it went like it kicked off really hard. And so we had lived in a townhouse, and suddenly I was just like, "How am I gonna get my toddler to into her bed for a nap? How am I going to get up the stairs?" Like, I suddenly felt overwhelmed, and I'm like, "This is not gonna be good," because, for like I said, I was still traumatized by the length of my first labor. I couldn't imagine doing that for 2 days.
Right.
I was terrified that the intensity, I was like, "How have I forgotten how hard this is?" Um, because it was a lot that came at me at once.
Did you call your husband home?
I called him, I called my midwife back, and I called my mom so that she could, hang out with my toddler, and I left them a sticky note on the door and said, "I'm getting in the bathtub. I need some water to just chill out a bit." But yeah, and that was late morning that started. And well, first I'm sitting on the ball, and I had forgotten until this last labor how helpful the ball was. But I did a lot of the ball with my first labor, and it was slow, and so I've been kind of timid about using it. So I was sitting on the ball with him with his labor because I just needed relief. And I'm sitting on one side of the bed, and we had a bathroom in the hallway on the other side of the bed, and then we had our own bathroom, which was, like, right next to my side of the bed. And I just remember her encouraging me, "Why don't you just try to go to the other bathroom when you need to go pee?" And so I went around the bed, went to the other bathroom, and on the toilet, I remember feeling my very first fetal ejection reflex.
Mhm.
And I was just like, "Wow." And it was all instinctual from that, like, from that point. I went back into my room somehow, told them to put the shower curtain on the floor, and I got down in, like, this kneeling lunge, and it was 2 pushes and he was out. And I was just, like,
In shock.
shocked, in shock. It was amazing. I could not believe that it had been so different than the first. And, like, immediately after, like, we didn't know if we were gonna have more kids, but at that even then, we were saying, like, "If we ever had more, we didn't need the midwives here. This is, like, totally doable." The Lord clearly took care of us in this situation. It wasn't like the midwives were doing anything but catching. So that's how that went. But then after he was born, I spent the next couple years being up all night because both of them were horrible sleepers. And my husband at that time was quick to want to get them out of our bedroom or out of our bed. And so at 4 months, they had to move out of our bedroom. And I spent all night, every night, going back and forth between the toddler and the baby's room. And it was just, I didn't sleep. And I was so exhausted from that I didn't want any more kids. I felt very done. Especially once the younger one gets to be like 18 months to 2 years, and life got easy again, and I started getting physically fit, and I didn't want anything to do with pregnancy and birth and all that. Like, I was done. So, yeah, so his could not have been more different than hers. It was crazy.
Well, it sounds like a classic, like, first time labor, classic second time labor.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Really slow and then really fast,
Yeah.
or faster than you would have ever expected.
Mhm. Just such a good initiation to motherhood. I envy those who don't have a really long first labor, but when you think you know it all and you go in, it's just so classic to have that immediate realization that in motherhood in general, life doesn't go as you think it should,
Right.
and it's often not as easy as you would like.
No
So,
kidding. So a couple years in, life is easier now because your kids, I imagine, are sleeping a little bit better and you kind of have your
Mhm.
body back to you. What instigates the third then? Because we know obviously you went on to have several more. So
Yeah, yeah. So, I feel like the Lord was already doing some work in me. Just I became very obsessed with physical fitness. And I think he was teaching me even just some of the parables that are written into the human body for the spiritual. So that started, I think, before I got pregnant with her. But I think for her pregnancy was his way of showing me that control is an illusion and that I needed to let him, if I said I belonged to him, I needed to fully belong to him, body included. And so the ways that I was still grasping for control, he just showed me like I have created this person for my purposes, and anything that you do or don't do doesn't add to my purpose. So you can either go with me or you can fight against me, but
but I'm still gonna win.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Make it easier, make it hard. It's like we tell our kids. So when I got pregnant with her, I did not feel ready. I was very, very anxious about it. And not because like I was afraid of birth itself. It was just I didn't really want to go back into the baby stage when like life was easy and I was really having fun with my two kids and I had my six pack abs. Like I didn't want to get back into it. And the Lord showed me that life is more than, the easy two kid little family, it can be more than that. So when I did get pregnant, I asked my husband if he still felt like we could do it just by ourselves, birth. And he still felt very good about it. And so I just spent that whole time investing in my faith and learning how to trust him, not just spirit wise, but my body too, just to ask him for counsel on like what it was that I needed to eat and if I needed to do any tests. Because walking that line it can be very tricky now. Like because there's just so much demonic influence in the medical system that some of it you just don't need to deal with, has nothing to do with our faith. So just learning where he wanted me to be at that point, and he changes things from pregnancy to pregnancy as I've discovered, but for me. But I spent a lot of time just walking trails and hiking with my kids, hanging out by the creek. We called it rock hopping. So we'd go down to the James River and they would jump on the rocks. And I would just sit there and pray. And that is 100% where I got my confidence that he was, in fact, going to be the authority in the birth process, that I could trust him with her life, my life. And the one thing I would say that where my faith wavered was that I had always been told by my midwives that I had anemia. Like I was low on iron and that could cause hemorrhage and this and that. And so I went and got my blood tested just by purchasing my own labs. And I think also another part of it was fear, just that like I would be seen as neglectful or I don't know, like if something bad happened, right? If the state or anybody, I didn't want them to take our kids because we were being ignorant or whatever. So I was trying to keep records and I think getting my blood drawn was part of that. But I did find that after her birth, my blood, I think my numbers were good. So that's where the Lord was showing me it's not necessarily about you and your knowledge, it's about my care for you. And you said you trusted me, but now you're checking your numbers and thinking that you're going to get a good outcome based on those numbers. And that's not trust. So that's one thing that he showed me that like I was leaning onto an idol for like my security and feeling safe when I was saying I was trusting him with all of it. And so
Yeah.
like I felt very, very depleted after her birth. Like I didn't go in or anything, but I did drink a lot of chlorophyll and replenish my blood supply that way. But I would say that I probably lost more than a doctor would be comfortable with.
Yeah.
But she was my first free birth, and it was a very well spaced out 12 hours. It was like not overwhelming. He was very kind to give me not an excruciatingly long labor, and not overpowering, intense, crazy experience like with my boys. So that was just it was so special, and I just remember feeling very amazed at the fact that we had had a baby without anybody else there, but also very ordinary because, for years and years and years and ages past, the women have done that. It's you kind of join this crowd of women who like, okay, birth is just birth.
Yeah.
Birth,
Birth is part
it's
of
not
life.
that dramatic. It's just not. And it was overwhelming in its just simplicity. And I don't know. It's just an awesome feeling just to witness the power of God and just be humbled by just the realization that I had nothing to do with that. And there was no conscious power of my own that was making this happen. So,
Yeah. If this podcast has been with you through pregnancy, labor, or those quiet postpartum moments, and it's helped you feel more confident, grounded, or less alone, I want to share something new. You can now support the show with a small monthly donation or a one-time gift. Your support helps keep these conversations going and makes this resource available to parents who really need it. If this show has supported you in this season of life, I'd be so grateful if you'd consider supporting it back. Visit the show notes to find the link to donate. I truly thank you for being a part of the Surrendered Birth community. So did you tell anybody about your plans to free birth, or did anyone know, or was it just you and your husband who knew?
we try to keep it to ourselves because based on the reactions to our initial like home
Home birth?
birthing plans, we're like, this isn't probably going to go over very well. But I felt very comfortable, keeping it to ourselves and not like feeling like I needed to explain myself. Somehow, I don't remember if my mom found out or not. Like, it's kind of foggy. She definitely didn't project any of her fears on me, and so I'm thankful for that. She was very respectful. If she did know, I don't remember. But my mother-in-law, I feel like, was a little bit more concerned. She said, "I don't have any problem with Drew delivering the baby." And at that time, it was just like grated on me that she would say delivering because I'm like, he's not delivering the baby. The Lord's delivering the baby. But her main concern was getting a birth certificate.
Oh.
So that's pretty much all the feedback we got about from people that knew that we were not having a midwife. So, but yeah,
Mm.
for the most part, we tried to keep it from getting out too far because we didn't want any anxious but well-meaning family members saying more than they needed to. So
Right. So did they find out after the fact, or did you guys just kind of let them have the impression that a midwife had been there?
yeah, so it was actually we kind of paid for it later, but I decided that we should just have 1 week without anybody even knowing she had arrived. I think actually Drew and I decided together. We didn't want to have company. And so I knew that if we told people that she was born, we would have visitors. And so we didn't call anyone. We just kind of stayed in our little bubble. And it was just the most amazing cozy week because it was in early March, or actually it was the middle of March, but we had a snowstorm like a couple days later, and my mom is still maybe a little bit bitter that we didn't tell them right away. But it was so wonderful, and we all, like, really loved that memory. My husband actually we lived in a Cape Cod at that point, and I don't know if you know what that is, but it's, like, very classic Richmond style house, and the roofs are, like, very sharp angle, very deep pitch, and then so you can kinda see that in the upstairs, and our room was in the upstairs, so, like, it was just a cozy little spot where we could see out, like, all the little, like, dormer windows and the skylights, and he brought up our dining room table and just made food downstairs, so I wouldn't have to go downstairs to make food or get food. He would just and we could eat together. So,
Oh,
that was just a really special, like, week where nobody knew she was even there, like, I wasn't on social media, I just soaked it in. It was amazing.
that's really precious. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone waiting a week. But I kind of love that. That's also awesome at
Yeah,
the same time.
yeah.
So after that, do you feel like you guys were hooked on free birth, or did you know you were going to have like several more kids, or did you think you were done again? Like, what was your mindset after that third one?
I think that at that time we were both of the opinion that the Lord was controlling my womb and we were going to let him do that. And if any more that we had, we were pretty confident that we would want to do that way again. It was just so nice. Like I didn't have any tearing. I didn't there was just no drama. Nobody had to come in our house. I actually did have a midwife come give her the PKU test because I thought at that time that I had to. I mean, it is required by law, but you can get an exemption in Virginia. I didn't know that then. So, and I thought it was related to her birth certificate. So I was having the midwife come in order to do that so that I could file for the birth certificate. But then the midwife told me just after her heels pricked, and I'm like sad and crying, like, why does she, she's hurting, the baby's hurting. And she's like, oh, that has nothing to do with this. And I was like, ah, dang it. So she's like, no, I can get you like the form for
Exemption.
refusing the test. Yeah. So she gave me that. So that's one good thing that came out of it. And we almost missed the deadline for her birth certificate because I had sent in a birth certificate request form to Virginia, but I didn't realize since they didn't have a vital record form that there would be no birth certificate. Like I couldn't request a birth certificate if there was no vital record. And so only like right before the 30 days, because you're supposed to get it filed within 30 days or else they ask for more proof that you were actually pregnant. It gets
It gets
harder.
complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were on our way to a competition. My husband was climbing trees competitively, and we were on our way to DC, and we just stopped in at the health department and filled it out, and just right inside of 30 days. So that was a whole other thing that we learned with her. So
Nice.
I just thought it was going to be easy, and it was a little bit more complicated. But
In North Carolina, you have a year to
okay.
submit everything. So yeah, that is 30 days is a little bit quicker.
I don't know that you have to have it. I just think that they ask for more details, and maybe even like for a professional
Like a
signature and stuff like
provider.
that. I would
Yeah.
have had to go to my chiropractor and ask them for evidence, because I don't even think I did take a pregnancy test with her, but with others, I haven't even taken a pregnancy test. So it's not like you can just submit like afterward, you can't submit like proof of pregnancy.
Right.
So I actually had after her, she was about 18 months when I got pregnant with number four. And I didn't take a test with that. And I was at the time we were getting ready to go to a family reunion. And I was hand dyeing all these shirts. And there was like these chemical mordants, chemicals, and all this stuff that I retroactively, I looked at it and I'm like, I wonder if that's why. But I ended up miscarrying number four heading into our family reunion. So that was in 2019, and it was really hard because I didn't have any proof of my pregnancy. I wasn't sure if that's what it was. And actually, that was my husband's probably one of his first times of actually hearing from the Holy Spirit. It convinced him that he was hearing from the Lord. We're sitting down at a table, our dinner table, and I was like kind of sad because we were excited about telling our family, and I was bleeding, and I was just like, well, maybe it was just a really late period. I don't know. And I just felt like this instant heaviness, and I got up to go to the bathroom, and Drew heard from the Holy Spirit that, she's lost it. And so that's kind of what like convinced me. And it was definitely more tissue than just a period.
Yeah.
Um, so that was hard for me to not have any like proof that I was pregnant. That was hard because I was still trying to reason in my head that it was just a period, and then realizing that it was a life, and I'm flushing it, and it was really that was really a tough thing for my faith, but the Lord used it in that, like, we think that the best possible outcome is a living child, but he sees loss in a different way than we do because he's outside of our reality, and he's doing things that don't understand, with unborn children. We don't know what he's doing with those lives that he's created. And so that just gave me a hope that, like, even if I were to lose a child, whether it was stillborn or even one that I've, already met, and in his world, like, his authority is what matters. His authority over it is what matters, not like what I think of the situation. So that just allowed me to release just a little bit more control into his hands and trust that, like, even what looks like a loss to me, to him there's something else he's doing. So that
Yeah.
happened in 2019. After my miscarriage, we both were hoping for another baby, but not specifically saying that, to one another. We decided to bring that to the Lord and together out loud. And the way that we grew up, that was we weren't super comfortable even praying together, which is really sad if you think about like in Christian environment, you that would be should be normal. But we were still very young in actual faith, and we prayed out loud together and asked the Lord, for another son. And at the same time, we had been hoping for a piece of property and a house of our own because we were living in a rental at that time. And so we prayed for both of those things. And that same month that we prayed, I got pregnant with Cormac. And since it was the end of 2019, one of the first challenges to my faith in that pregnancy was COVID. Because before I even knew what COVID was, I was having pregnancy cravings and I went to this little Chinese grocery store and I got all these, Asian noodles and stuff. So I don't know if that's where I picked it up, but I got so sick, so very sick. I've never been that sick in my life. And I could hardly breathe. Like it was heavy on my chest. And I remember having like a low grade fear that the fever that I had was going to affect my baby. And that was just another experience of letting the Lord, like, take care of us. I knew that He had put the baby there and was taking care of both of us, but I knew that the Lord wasn't doing anything not on purpose, He had us. So, that was another experience for my husband too, to grow in his faith and trusting the Lord more than doctors. And like, we didn't know anything about COVID. So when I actually went back to the gym after I was sick is when I first heard about the coronavirus is what they called it then. And I started looking at symptoms and I was like, "Wait, I think this is what we
This
what
is
we
what I
had."
just had. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was interesting. And then obviously being pregnant, like you want to have complete breath and everything. And I think I remember like a couple conversations where I would just say, my physician wants me to be able to breathe, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna cover my face. Because my physician did make my breath. So I'm just gonna let him have my breath and not worry about so much about sickness. Just interesting conversations that we had. Um, being kind of out of the loop a little bit when it came to like the medical, like all the fears that the propaganda and all that stuff. So it was just a whole different experience. Because I wasn't seeing a doctor and people are like, how was it being pregnant, during COVID? And it really wasn't very different from any of my others, except for the masks. And Costco didn't want me to take any more than one of my children in.
Oh, goodness.
So we just quit Costco at that point. I was just like, I can't get a babysitter every time I need to get groceries.
Right.
So that was crazy. But it was a weird time. So in summer, I was very pregnant and everybody, we were looking for a place to live, like a house of our own. Not anxiously, but we were searching and I found this place. And it had been on the market for a couple months by the time I had seen it. But when I looked online, it just looked like an old lady's house. And it just on there and it mentioned that there was creek frontage. And I'm like, let me just go look at it. Well, during COVID, you had to drive by and make sure that you wanted to get a meeting with the realtor or so that you wouldn't be wasting their time and all the trouble of contact if you weren't really interested. So I was like, well, I didn't see anything that was super unfortunate, so let's look at it. And so he came down and I was pretty big pregnant. I guess it was June and I had him in August, so I was close to due. And we have a really steep hill in the back. And we went down there and we saw the creek and we knew that this was the place. So what's amazing about buying this place is that we moved in 12 days so that the prayer we prayed for the baby boy in the house, like they were answered within 12 days of each other. So that was really neat. The hard part about his pregnancy is that we were moving and my husband was working as an arborist in really hot weather and he had like heat exhaustion that year. And so I was trying to move us by myself being pregnant. So that was
Ooh.
tough. But the Lord was faithful to just carry me through it. I remember weeding the pathway at the rental house like on my big fat pregnant butt. I'm like, I can hardly move. I don't want to do it. It was hot. And but he's so good and so faithful. Even like he carried me through. And I wouldn't say that I was not always gracious with my husband. I was very impatient with his job and feeling like I wanted a little help. So, I definitely didn't walk through that perfectly, but I'm thankful for what it taught me and like the capacity we have that we don't realize we have. Just testing, being pushed. So, but yeah, his labor, it started early evening and I was making pot pie and I was not really sure it was labor, so I was just kind of joking with my husband that maybe he'll finish the pot pie for me because that's my favorite postpartum like first meal. It's so good. But I had started like everything for it, but I told him I was like, "You might need to finish this." But like by 8 p.m., I was no, I was trying to go to bed. I was trying to go to bed, and I was not sure if it was labor, and I kept trying. But since we had just moved in, I decided just to start doing some work since I couldn't sleep. And I started washing curtains and doing all these weird things late at night. And I went in and out of the house and I was just amazed that I had my own private area to labor because I've always lived in it was a townhouse and it was like a neighborhood and it was very, very crowded outside. So I couldn't go outside and enjoy like fresh air without being like stared at. like
Yeah.
so with my first birth here at this house, it was just one of the things that the Lord just blessed me with was a place where, it didn't matter what noise I was making, like I still had that sacred, alone time with him. So, but I birthed him on the living room floor at midnight. And it was just so straightforward and simple that I hardly have any memories of it. He was big. He was not my biggest, but at that time he was my biggest. He was 9'6". So, no tearing and it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. So, we started a little bit of a homestead after him. So, we got chickens and I don't know what I was thinking, getting chicks when I had just had a baby, but that's what we did.
Well, that's better than a puppy. So
Yeah,
you could have gotten a
that's
puppy and
true.
that would have been harder.
Yeah.
Did you
Oh,
tell your family this time after you had him instead of waiting a week?
yes. Yeah, we did. My mom texted me. She was like, "Can you please just tell me that you're in labor so that I can pray for you?" I promise I won't tell anybody, just let me know. So I did end up not doing that again. So we told everybody pretty quick. We still didn't have guests for about a week though. So that was nice.
Mm. So now you're on your 5-acre homesteading with the creek and the new baby. How long between his birth and when you got pregnant with number 5?
So we did a lot of things right away. Because we were zoned agriculture and we're only like 15 minutes from the city of Richmond. And we're in a neighborhood. So it's just a unique spot that we can pretty much do whatever we want. And so we had big, big dreams of having a milk cow. And so we got started on a lot of stuff. Like we tried to tear out some turf grass using pigs because it was, it looked like a nice house, and we were just like the cow can't eat that, so we tried to tear that out. Anyway, we got really overloaded with a lot of livestock and trying to set up like our infrastructure when it had not been a farm for many, many years. So we were in way over our heads with a lot of animals, and I got pregnant with number 5. Again, the Lord, I feel like the Lord kind of like springs it on us, but I'll have like a total of 3 periods, and then I should have expected another one when there's 3 periods in a row and then another one. So I really don't remember how I found out that I was pregnant with number 5. I think at that time my mind was just so like embedded in agriculture and fencing and trying to sow grass and trying to keep kids from getting hurt by pigs and roosters, and there was just too much on my plate, way too much on my plate. To top it all off, my husband ended up getting a new job, a different type of job that involved traveling. And I was milking the cow whenever he left for work. So I'd spent a lot of time squatting during that pregnancy because I was milking the cow and hauling a lot of water because I was so determined to do everything just right that I really overworked myself. But I didn't want the cow to be drinking chlorinated water, so I would go down all the way down to the creek and haul water from the creek with buckets and brought that up, and so I was pretty strong, I would say, with
Yeah,
him.
I bet.
I remember one time tripping on the I don't know if you know what polywire is, but it's just a temporary fence that you can put up to keep like temporary paddocks. Um and I was holding milking buckets in both hands, and I tripped on the fencing, and I fell straight on my belly.
Oh,
And that was another of those, the thread of faith building experiences where I knew I wasn't going to go in and get, an image. I prayed. I just sat down and cried and prayed that the Lord was going to take care of the baby and that it was going to be okay. And if not, that I needed to let him do what he needed to do, and that was scary for me because I fell full on belly. I don't remember. I think I was like 6 months along, so my belly was pretty far out there.
yeah.
um, his birth was so funny because we're sitting there at breakfast. I'm telling my husband since he had just gotten this new job, he wanted a place to work from home, and we didn't have a desk, so I had found one on Facebook or Craigslist, and I showed it to him on my phone, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, I'll go pick that up." And I was kind of contracting. I had had prodromal labor with him for the first time. That was my first experience with that, and so I didn't know if what I was feeling was prodromal again, but I was kind of ignoring it, like mothers of many would. They you just kind of like, okay, I'll get
Right.
to it when I need to get to it. When I have to stop and focus, that's when I'm in labor. Um, and I wasn't there yet. So he went and he took our boys. He took Thayer and Cormac, and he left the girls. And my younger daughter was probably 3 at the time, 3 or 4, and she just threw this big fit. And as soon as they left, like I just felt like suddenly labor. It was labor. And so I immediately started praying like that he would come back fast enough to not miss it. I don't know how I knew to pray that because I'd never had a precipitous labor before. I mean, Cormac was 3.5 hours, but I just somehow knew that this was not going to be a very long one. And we were sharing milk with some friends at that time, and my friend was coming by to get it, and I was like, I can't even talk to her. So my oldest daughter had to take her milk out to the gate, and it was just the whirlwind, and took my first sip of Labor Aid at like 11:30 or 11:40, and I had him at 12:27.
Oh man, did your husband make it back?
He did. He did.
Did he know? Like, did you call him and tell him, like, hey?
Well, I might have texted him. I don't remember for sure. I think I might have just vaguely said like, "I hope you make it back in time," or something, because I think this is actually labor. Um, so they weren't like dilly-dallying around or whatever. So but I knew him. I know him. He doesn't leave things unfinished. It wasn't like he was going to come straight in when he got home. I knew he was going to put the desk where we were going to put the desk, which is up in the studio outside. I'm like, I know he's not going to come in. And so I was getting really anxious because I was in the bathroom. I wasn't wearing any clothes, and I wanted my water, which was in my bedroom. And we don't have a master bath. So I would have had to leave the bathroom and come get my water, but I really wanted my water. And so I was getting really agitated with him for not being there to get me my water. But it was crazy because we had just we'd had a coffee date. We weeded the garden a little bit. I took some clothes off the line, had some kale and eggs for breakfast. He left. And when he came back, it was just like, he needs to be here. Like, it was so crazy. Ordinary. It was wild. In previous labors to his, I had in the back of my head, there was this lingering thought that there was such a thing as a cervical lip. And so I always had this fear that if I push against the cervical lip, it's going to swell and then it's going to, cause a problem.
Stall.
And
Yeah.
so I had this idea in my head that I needed to somehow interfere and make sure that that didn't happen. So I would always hold it back, and when I was holding it back, I could tell that, it was triggering the contractions, and so I ended up breaking my water with both number 3 and number 4, and I just committed on with number 5, I was like, "I'm not gonna break it because I wanna see what's gonna happen if I don't." I just wanna let the Lord do it the way the Lord wants to do it and not try to be the boss.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was just like a rush of waters, and he was born, all in one contraction. I don't really remember how it went down. I had to ask my husband, "Did you catch or did I?" Because I know he didn't fall, but how did that even happen? I don't know.
So how long was your husband with you before you
Only
actually?
a few minutes. Only he had just come in the bathroom. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a wild ride, and I'm still not sure if it was the precipitous labor. like my brain had trouble catching up to the magnitude of what had happened, or if it was other things like postpartum depression came in on me because there was things going on with my husband's work. Like I was overwhelmed, but obviously by the farm, and my husband was traveling a lot, and I didn't feel emotionally supported. And there were other things going on that I didn't know about at that time that was kind of the reason behind the lack of emotional support. So I fell pretty hard into postpartum depression after number five. And so that was another one of those, just the Lord giving me a new kind of training and just a different experience that gives me more compassion, for somebody who's walking through that, and the ability to realize like you can't really it's not like you can fix yourself. It's not like that. You have to let him deliver, just like with pregnancy. It's a process of deliverance to let him bring you through it, and not to isolate. At that time we were not going to church, and I was pretty isolated, so it was a hard it was a really hard season. um
Were you not going to church because you were looking for a new church, or like what prompted that decision?
so because we grew up so like legalistic and religious, after going to a couple churches, we were very timid about anything that felt like it was trying to rope you into like a certain mold. And the first church we went to, my husband actually ended up working there in the audiovisual, like for a new campus. And it was too much for him because he was still doing manual labor. And he just could not work 7 days a week because his job was doing 6 days a week. And then he had to go Sunday first thing in the morning. And he was just like, I can't do it all. I can't. And so he ended up quitting from that job. And immediately after that, like nobody on staff would really acknowledge our family anymore. And we were like, it felt too much like the way we grew up, like the shunning almost that we had experienced with we actually ended up having to shun my parents when I was pregnant with my first, because they had left the group that we were in and we hadn't left it yet. And so they were telling us like we shouldn't fellowship with them. So that was tough to be pregnant with my first and not have any communication with my mom. She couldn't come to my baby shower. And anyway, so that was
That's the like cult group that you got out of.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
with our
good.
first church after that, yeah, with our first church after that, when they stopped talking to us after my husband stopped working there, it felt so similar that we were just like, this isn't Jesus. This isn't what we want. It felt like a culture or a social club. It wasn't, yeah. So we left that first church and we went to another one because I met a friend at a park who just really loved her church. And we went to that for a little while. And they started preaching from the front, like basically an expectation that you ought to foster and adopt. And my husband just got triggered by like somebody's trying to be the Holy Spirit for me. I don't want that. Like he didn't want that like manipulation,
Yeah.
because that was also another method that had happened in our the group we grew up in. So that was our first two experiences after the group. We call it the group. It was just like it was a no name, non-denominational, but basically we thought we were it. Um, but after we left that group, we went to 2 separate churches and had triggering experiences at both, and so we just stopped, and, we fellowshipped with other believers. We just didn't have a committed, like, congregation, like, that we spent time with. And that because when we were in the first church, we went to a small group and we loved it, and we couldn't get used to the fact that, like, when people move on, it's okay. We needed friendships that were deep and lasting, and we just felt like there was just this, like, temporary mentality. And so we wanted to build relationships organically and not be like, well, there's this fake bubble of Christians that you get together with on Sundays and you never see them and don't have anything to do with them. We didn't want that. So we were looking to build community in our own way, through our own means, without church. And that created just a hunger, a desperation really for me, especially. Like Drew had contact at work, like with other people, not necessarily Christians, which ended up causing some of the issues that I was talking about. Like there was some betrayal and stuff like that that I ended up having to walk through, that was probably a fruit of him not having solid friendships and relationships with other believers. So, that's kind of I went way too long on that, but
It's
the
okay. I'm
it's just such a long story, we did stop fellowshipping regularly except for, just people that we knew in different churches. So it was kind of an organic relationships that we would, like, get together with people, but it wasn't for the purpose of, like, a structured service or, like, worship, So that became awkward. Like, worship became awkward, and praying with others became more awkward, and at one point during that time, I heard the Lord say Sabbath. And I think he was just calling me to rest because we were grinding so hard over every weekend because we weren't going to church. And he called me to Sabbath. And so just after that time, I met a lady at my Azure drop who had been keeping Sabbath like on the seventh day. Um, and you might know it as Torah observant, or there's all these different names that people have for it, but that's what she was believing in. And so we started fellowshipping with them, her and another family, them and another family. And we started building relationships with them. And during that time, I got pregnant with my sixth. And that was a redemptive pregnancy because I got to have my mom at a baby shower. And that was just such a blessing. Like, I felt like the Lord gave me my sixth as just like a restful, like a breather. Like, we had some fellowship. I had a baby shower. I had massages. Like, it was just a really sweet time. Just I felt like the Lord was doing a lot of things in our family, giving us relationships. So, but that was in 2023, and I had him. I didn't test. I just knew that I was pregnant. Like, I just felt like I was pregnant, I guess. And I don't remember anything super dramatic during that pregnancy. Just feeling really thankful for just all the different little ways like the Lord had taught me and trained me, and that I was seeking him in new ways, whether, through the language, the Hebrew language. I loved learning the Hebrew language. I actually won a course, an online course during that pregnancy, and I was so sleepy that I didn't actually do the course very well, but it was really cool. I thought it was a really sweet gift from the Lord that I got to do that. So it was just a really blessed one, blessed pregnancy. And I had him in December of 2023, and his labor was almost exactly time wise like my third. So number three and number six. And it's crazy because they look alike too. So I went into labor in the late evening, and I labored through the night by myself and had them almost at the exact same time of day. So like super early morning. But one thing I learned about with him was, well, we had a bat in our house. There was a bat flying around in the living room. And I'm like, Lord, what were you saying? Like, I don't understand.
what was that about?
Oh, yeah, it was weird. And I had thought for sure it was a girl too, because I had felt like I had heard a name when I first got pregnant with him, and I just knew it was a girl name. And I was very confused when he was born. So when I went into labor, my husband was working on the fire because it was cold outside. He was working on the fire, and I just kept seeing something in my peripheral vision, like that there was a bat flying around, or that there was something flying around and I just, when he said it was a bat, I just was kind of in disbelief that it was.
That it was a bat.
So he caught that. Yeah, he caught that and got it out. And we actually had my older kids come down. So my three oldest actually were a part of that one. And I just had a feeling like they were waiting on me, and I felt like I was being rushed in some way, I guess. And so I ended up pushing with him, and he was 10 pounds and 6 ounces.
So
And
he was your
so
biggest.
that was my biggest.
Yeah.
But it was a new experience to not have that, fetal ejection reflex, but be expecting it. With my first, I didn't expect it. I didn't know there was such a thing. But with him, I was expecting it and it didn't come. And so I still don't understand why, except that maybe I was hurrying things along myself because my kids were in the room. Like, I didn't want them to miss it, because after having number five, I just didn't know how fast it was going to go. And so
Right.
I invited them in, and they were encouraging me and all that stuff. But when like three kids are staring at you, like, you just kind of like, let's get the show on the road. I was in kind of an efficient mindset that, like,
Yeah.
let's get this done. And so I really had to push him out because I wasn't being like overwhelmed by, the power of the fetal ejection.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he was born at early in the morning, and it was a weird one because my husband was not I feel like he wasn't fully emotionally there that time. I feel like his mind was somewhere else or something because he was just like, "Yeah, let's get the cord burned. Let's do this, that, the other." Like, and it may have been just like his job was like influencing his mind and like this, like he had done it so many times now that it was just kind of run of the mill, let's
Yeah.
get this done. And it wasn't, I didn't feel like I had that time to just soak it up. And so there are little regrets that like inform every single time. There's little regrets. I don't know if I should call them regrets because it's not. It's just teaching experiences that you want to do something different. And so just being willing to acknowledge that like that wasn't what I was hoping for. Helps me to do something intentionally different the next time instead of just kind of letting it flow, like letting it do whatever it does, like realizing like I want to really soak it in and not try to go from one thing to another. Even like I was impatient with my placenta after him, and I was just like, why did I feel so anxious about that? Like it's okay to sit in a puddle of blood for a few minutes and soak up the baby that you just like met. It's
Yeah.
like I don't know. I had like this weird rushed mentality with him. It was very strange. It's still so like surreal in my mind, but anyway, it wasn't hard. It was so different in so many different ways. I don't know.
Did you end up having any sort of postpartum depression with him? Or do you feel like had you gotten rid of a lot of the animals by that point?
Yes, we did. We had cut out almost everything, and I'm trying to remember what all we still had left. We still had the sheep. And that was special. We really like having sheep. It still ended up not being right for us. So we did get rid of them too. And I did have friendships too. And I think that had a lot to do with just feeling supported and enjoying life, really. Like it wasn't like just the grind of our family and a bunch of animals. We had other things. We were getting together with them on Sabbaths. And so that was a fun time. About the time when he was 8 months old. I feel like I fell into a really religious mindset, partly because of the relationships I was in and like the mentality of the Torah observant culture.
But you still weren't at a church. It was just through these
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were actually fellowshipping just in our home on Sabbaths, and we started doing the feasts with them, and we planned to go on the fall feast is called Sukkot, and we went on a trip. And my sixth was only like 8 months at that time, and we were the point of Sukkot is to rejoice, and I really struggled with rejoicing. I felt like there was a lot of gossip going on. I just felt like there was some bad fruit. Um,
With the people that you were doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
in these relationships, and I was just like sensing that something was not quite right there, and there was a little bit of bullying, and so I was really struggling with like needing relationships, needing community, and not really sure if we were doing it the way we needed to do it. And my husband, he acknowledges this too, that like he wasn't necessarily leading our family. So he was kind of just letting me take the reins on that, meeting people, getting together with people. Um, and so it got really, really toxic and hard during that time. And I got pregnant just after we came back from that camping trip with those other two families. And I didn't know it at the time, but I'm not exactly sure how it happened, except that one of them got offended with something that I said or did, and it ended up being spoken of to the other one, and then they both cut me off pretty much. And so I lost my friends like immediately at the very beginning of that pregnancy, and I'm still like wrestling like what did I do wrong, and what how can I like reconcile it. And it was just very, very interesting. I just feel like the Lord was pruning me
Yeah.
particularly, of pride, of like self-righteousness, and the way he needed to do that was, very humbling and difficult for me. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I'm really sorry that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just especially because you were like going from this church experience to that church experience to that church experience to, oh, we have these friends and now we're not being like super religious by this church. But now all of a sudden, after a couple years, these friends are the ones kind of pushing that on us. So that's got to be hard.
Yeah. So yeah, so our community sort of fell apart right at the beginning of my seventh pregnancy. So I'm wrestling with the relationship challenges and all that stuff, and I'm tired because I'm nursing my baby, and I'm hear this. You're on your eighth. You're on your eighth. You're on your, and it was so crazy because I was half asleep, but I heard the Lord say, "You're on your eighth," and I had just had my first cycle after my sixth baby, which he was only 10 months old. So I had just had one cycle during October of 2023. No, 2024. Sorry.
Or,
So it crossed my mind like, okay, so if I had another baby, it would be my eighth pregnancy because I had my fourth was a miscarriage. But it just kind of went in and went out of my head. It wasn't like I was committed that I thought I was pregnant. It was just like, what was that about, basically? Because I had just had my cycle and um, clearly was not pregnant yet because it was literally had just finished. It was very strange. It started off strange, and then my friends cut me off, and I'm all like, What do I even do? I don't know. I need friendships. I don't know where to go, from here." And I just heard the Lord say I was actually starting a new like linen reselling business because I got really into like thrifting linen clothes and reselling them, which was kind of fun. I really enjoyed doing it, but I remember ironing clothes and just crying out to the Lord, like, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know how to reconcile this situation. They seem very closed off to reconciliation, and I don't know how to heal this. And he just said, "Be still and wait on me, and I will strengthen your heart." And so over the next few months, I just, really sought the Lord and tried to wait on Him for, to understand why it had happened and what I should do. We still kept Sabbath as a family. We're still worshiping on Sabbath as a family, and um, then I think in January we had an experience at my in-laws' house where my father-in-law said some things to me that was very harsh, and I was pregnant. They didn't know I was pregnant, but he was very critical. It felt very critical of my mothering, and I just didn't even want to tell them that we were having another one at that time, just because of the way he was speaking to me. And at that time, my husband was pretty detached from me, I guess, emotionally. There was a lot, spiritually that was going on. I didn't feel the security of being led by my husband. And so I had a lot of insecurity. I was trying to do my best for my kids, like spiritual growth, like whether it was fellowshipping or worshiping the Lord or, singing to him, like teaching them the right way, the way that they should go. And I was just troubled that I just didn't know how to do that, without the community that we needed. And um, so with all of that in mind, like my husband was not he didn't defend me when it came to like what his dad had said. And he kind of jumped down my throat along with him. And so I felt very attacked by both of them. And like I was really floundering because I was pregnant. Satan had started whispering to him about how like the burdensome large family, and he was believing some lies that I firmly believe that there was like a demonic spiritual attack going on in his mind over like the family that we already had. And like it was excruciating. It was so painful to hear him like questioning like why we had six kids already and why we're, and I didn't feel supported from the beginning. He didn't feel very involved and invested in that, in this pregnancy at all. And so it was so opposite of the sixth where I had felt so supported and loved. Like I felt very like everything dropped out. And I just kept feeling that the Lord was giving me an opportunity to experience something that was just like everything was stripped away except him. And I did not realize how hard and painful it was going to get. Like even in January, where I felt like my husband wasn't defending me when it came to what my father-in-law said, Like that was really hard. And I was, trying to explain to my husband like how I felt, and it was not landing with him. And then sometime between like February, we told our family that we were pregnant in January. Sometime in between February, when he had gone on a business trip, he came back just very cold and strange. And I was just like, man, there must have been a demon at that like airport that got onto him. I don't even know that he said some things that really confused me, that were like so far fetched that like you'd probably be like, he said what? It was crazy. It was like enough to make me like call out for my brothers and sisters in Christ and be like, what do I do? I don't know what's going on right now. Like, he didn't cheat on me, like, physically, it wasn't like that, it was just, like, the ways his mind was taking him, like, that he didn't feel committed to our relationship anymore, and it was scary, it was very scary. So, our anniversary was April 4th, and he ended up going to a competition, with our 4 older kids without me, and, during our anniversary. And at that time, like, the Lord, like, opened my eyes to the fact that I had been, like, grinding so hard and, like, making no room for true rest. Like, even observing Sabbath had become, like, a religious, like, repetitive thing, in our family and our culture. Our family culture was very, like, harsh and uninviting, and so the Lord started pulling things out of me just in that very isolating time. My husband sent me to California, where my family lives, with my two youngest boys when I was pregnant, and it was a special time because it allowed me to a time away from my husband to and to just be cared for. But it was just like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And there was like lots and lots of spiritual attacks. Like, what is he up to? What is he doing while you're gone? There was just a lot of fears that was coming at me, that I had never experienced, especially being pregnant. And you know what they'll like, even in Christian groups, they'll talk about how like you've got to be afraid of what your emotions are doing to your baby, and how your baby is gonna like feel all this stuff, and how it's going to affect their development and this and that, or even like how labor's gonna go because you're not being supported emotionally, and like if you have any unresolved traumas or anything like that, like there's all these fears and anxieties that can be talked about in natural birth circles, that like you don't want anybody in the room who you're not totally feeling safe with. And I'm like, well, what if that's my husband and we're free birthing, like
Right. I'm gonna need somebody there.
it was a whole load of like things to wrestle through with just the Lord, and say like, if he's not willing to even be there, like it's just me and the Lord. Like, do I invite my sister? Um, just for like practical help. Like, I did not know what was gonna happen. And it was just such an interesting experience of like full trust. Like, people would say free birth is full trust, but this was like a whole other level of complete trust, that like the Lord
Right.
this, and I couldn't even focus on. So I've always been into healthy eating and nutrition and all this stuff, and I wouldn't have said I took credit for my kids' health and pregnancies that I've had, but I would say that at some level you realize like there's a cause and effect. Like, when you eat well, like you can have better outcomes.
Right.
But in this pregnancy, I wasn't going out and eating junk, but I was not able to focus on like how much protein was I getting. Like, I didn't have an appetite. I didn't care about food. I was 100% in sympathetic nervous system. It was bad. Like, it was hard because I was just praying desperate prayer after desperate prayer every single day, falling apart multiple times a day in front of my kids, to my family on the phone. Like, it was the most emotional pain I've ever been in my life. And just the Lord carrying me through it, and like showing me that like this is just another way that I want to show you that I alone am your care provider, and I alone, like, I'm going to take you through this. And at one point, when we actually announced to our family, we did this fun little scripture hunt. It was before all this went down with my husband. There was a song playing in the background when we took these videos of our kids doing this scavenger hunt for scriptures about babies, because that's how we told the kids that we were pregnant. And the background song came on. The song that was playing in the background was called Shalom by Bridge Worship. And it's crazy because the video somehow like picks up that, even though I had put another song on the video, somehow it picks up that song in the video. And later on in in my pregnancy, I had a dream that I had a baby girl. I was by myself, and I had a baby girl, and she started singing "Shalom, Shalom, Shalom" by herself, like just out of the womb. And I just knew that that was like the Lord was telling me not only like we wanted another girl really badly. We had wanted another girl since like number 5 for my daughter. Like my daughter had really, really wanted a sister. And we had been praying for another girl, partly because like boys, 3 boys back to back was challenging. They're very busy.
Uh-huh.
And
Tell me about it.
I needed just I don't know. I relate with baby girls because I'm a woman, it's I don't know. There was a lot of emotional just upheaval that was going on, and the fear of having another little boy, like, and that sounds terrible to say that, but when like I was totally maxed out emotionally, and they're all pulling each other's triggers all the time, I was just like desperate to not have another boy. And that I know that's totally a human emotion, and I would have accepted whatever the Lord was offering. And that was just another thing that I had to wrestle with, was just like, what if the Lord isn't going to give you that, and that's okay, to be okay with that, and to treasure whatever it was he's offering. Um anyway, all that to say, he gave me that dream that I had a baby girl and she was singing shalom to me because her name has to do with peace. Her name is Shiloh. And I just felt like he was telling me, just giving me that word to hold on to trust that he was going to give us another daughter. And he had truly spoken the name Shiloh whenever I was pregnant with my sixth. It just hadn't, the time for that promise had not come yet. So anyway,
So were things still like really distant emotionally with your husband when you went into labor?
yeah, it was awkward. He had taken off his ring. He had been sleeping in the other room. And I just being alone was really, really hard. And I just felt like the Lord was asking me to hire a photographer for this birth. And I've not allowed anybody else into my labors because I've been afraid that it was going to affect things. And with this new like trust fall experience, I was just like, it isn't about what's out there, it's about what's within me. My trust is within me, and having another person in the room isn't going to add or subtract from that. And so he provided a photographer. I asked my husband if he wanted to be a part of the like the maternity photo shoot that she was offering me, and he didn't want anything to do with it. So it was so awkward, and I just kinda had to go in not knowing if he was gonna be there or that he would want to be a part of it. And, um, I think he had told me before I went into labor that he wanted to be there, like, he was willing to do his normal job. Um, but I didn't know what to expect emotionally, right? Like, there's a difference between a guy who knows what to do in the room of a woman who's having a baby that he's witnessed before, and feeling like you're safe with him and he's like emotionally present. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I knew that I couldn't count on it being like a special like connecting experience with him. Like I knew that I needed to rely fully on the Lord for every emotional, like the stability and strength that I needed for labor, because it is a spiritual event, right? Um so yeah, I let him know, and I let my photographer know I was in labor. It was early afternoon, and it was weird because the morning I couldn't. There was like no signs at all that I was about to go into labor. It was just a very normal morning. It was just folding laundry and putting my little boys down for a nap. And I felt the splash on my leg. So that was 100% new. I've never had my labor break or my water break before labor. So that was exciting because I was just like, I was so ready. But also, I think that the Lord had told me that I was going to have the baby on the 22nd, which I wasn't listening for the first several times. I felt like he told me that because it was my actual like 40 weeks. And I was just like, am I just thinking that because it's 40 weeks? Like, I don't know. But I had felt like a very strong feeling that that the baby was going to be born on the 22nd. And at that point, I didn't know whether that was boy or girl because we have all these weird patterns with the numbers of our boys and our girls. And so we thought if it was a girl, it would be born the 15th. And if it was a boy, it was going to wait until August. And so being born the 22nd, I was just like, I don't even know. So yeah, that'll teach me to look for signs. But anyway, so I felt the splash down my leg and I texted both of them. And Drew came in while talking to our insurance company, our whole house insurance company, because we had gotten kicked off the policy because we had asbestos siding. So he had spent all this time changing out the siding, and he was actually trying to reinstate our home insurance while I was in early labor. And he had come home to be with me, but I was so frustrated because I was hearing like the on call or on hold music. And it was just like another, like, it felt distant for him to be doing that when I was like feeling
In
like I wanted
labor.
him there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just a reminder, like, keep your expectations in check. Like, he's doing what he feels like he needs to do, and so you need to get what you need from the Lord. And so my photographer came in. I let her come in around 3, I think, and she just took a few photos and we chit chatted a little bit. And it was awkward. I feel like at first because my husband had not been really like connected with me, talking with me much at all, except for like very surface level stuff for a very long time. And so it was just like we're like three strangers in a room kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was weird. And I remember feeling like he's not wearing his ring. Like, what is this going to look like in the pictures to our baby later on? Like, I felt very uncomfortable about that whole thing. I was just like, this is not, it didn't feel right. But then, like, as labor went on, I just felt like there was a deeper spiritual connection happening with my husband that I was excited about. Like, I felt like he wanted to be there for me, and he knew what to do when. And there it was very much like the Holy Spirit was giving him to me for that support. It was a blessing. But I went into the bathtub. Like, I always end up in the bathtub just for a little bit of labor, just to survive some contractions. And I remember him saying something like, don't you think, because I was laying on my back in the bath. I remember Drew saying something like, don't you think that you want to get more upright, or don't you think you might be slowing things down? And I remember just knowing that what I was doing was enough. Like, the Lord has got this process in control, and it's not on me to make sure it progresses. It's not about what I can do to make it happen faster, because I had thought before, like, I had been in my thinking brain. I'd been like, okay, if you stay upright, the head's pressure is on the cervix and it'll open faster. And like, I'm
Right.
in this like, I was in this like controlling mode, right? And with this time, I had realized how much the Lord had changed my mindset, and that like, and just a deep knowing that the Lord was in charge and I didn't have to control anything. And that just, I feel like that confidence was just a fresh thing for me to learn it about myself in that labor, in her labor, was just knowing that I didn't have to manipulate or control anything that was going on. Yeah, I only spent like an hour in the bathtub, and I wasn't trying to manipulate anything that was going on and trying to force it to happen. Didn't break my waters, or I did feel one time for progress, and I did feel the bag of waters. Let's see. I probably came back in here at 4, yeah, probably 4:30, and labored for another hour. And that time my husband was like, we were worshiping together, and like it was just such a sacred place. Like, I had asked the Lord specifically, like, I had asked for 4-hour labor, and I had asked for afternoon, evening, because of the light that comes into this room. Oh, and room is like my prayer closet. I had spent so many hours just on my knees in this room, um, just anointing it basically with tears and prayers. And it just felt like such a beautiful full circle time to have. Like, Drew's worshiping and singing with me, and the lights coming in, and it felt so holy. I don't know. I don't even know how else to describe it, except that I just knew that I was in the presence of the Lord. And like, I had no fear, I had no anxiety, I wasn't in a hurry. Like, I've always thought, like, if I had somebody in the room, I would, because of what happened with my kids, I thought that maybe like I would feel like I was being in a position to them, Like, it was like she wasn't even there. It was more amazing than I had ever imagined or had asked for. So, um, it was just exactly what I was hoping for, and I saw it was a girl. I just cried. It was such a powerful moment to, like, know that the Lord had, heard that request. And, like, I'd always struggled with feeling like, if you truly, if you're upfront with your desires to the Lord, like, I feel like I had a dad who would always listen for what I wanted and then do the opposite. And I don't know that that was intentional, but it gave me like a bit of a fear of praying for what I really desire with the Lord, because I would always feel like there was a spitefulness or something, and so I was always afraid to be clear with the Lord about what I really truly wanted and desired. And just seeing that it was a girl, and having people like caution me throughout the time I was pregnant. Like, I felt like I knew it was a girl because the Lord had promised me a girl. But you have all these well-meaning people like, don't get too, don't be overly confident, But that was just one of the things that the Lord was working in my faith, was just having that confidence that he did want to do that for us. So, and that he had did promise our Shiloh.
After she was born, what happened with you and your husband after having that experience together?
Um, yeah, that's what got hard to accept, is that, like, there was this new connection and everything, and I expected everything to change, and it didn't. I had to wait. And that was just another experience of, like, wrestling through just spiritual attacks by myself, in bed, like, needing that shielding and protection that my husband's supposed to be off, supposed to give, and feeling like I'm here by myself. Like, well, what if something happens? What if I bleed out? Because, like, when you're early postpartum and you need something in the middle of the night, you don't want to pick up the phone and call your husband from the other room. Like, that was
Right.
hard.
He should
Like,
be
that was
right there.
really hard. Yeah. And so it was excruciating. It did not immediately, it was not immediately transformed into, like, this wonderful, beautiful marriage. But um, so I slept with her alone, and I'm like worrying about, like, oh, what about those memories of him, like, with all of our other babies? He's been in the bed with me and, like, been ready to help. And like, just there's so many emotions when you're postpartum. It was
Yeah.
just a lot to handle. Like, trying to learn emotional, like, resilience, and while having hormones be crazy, absolutely crazy, is just such a testimony of the Lord's faithfulness to carry you through anything. Because I couldn't just say what I was feeling with my husband. Because out of self-protection, he just would go, like, leave the room, or, like, I knew that it was not safe to speak what I was actually feeling with him, because I wouldn't necessarily say that I had a fear of him leaving me. I just did not want to. I wanted to be different, right? I wanted to be careful with how I spoke to him, so that didn't come out as an accusation. I mean, there's so many things about marriage that I've learned in the last year, just about how, like, how men think and how women think. And um, I needed to be transformed in the way that I spoke to my husband, so that, like, I could communicate a need without it feeling to him like an attack. And he's grown so much over the last few months. We did start going to church in May, so it was around Mother's Day, and I was still pregnant. We did start going to church, and so during that time, we ended up going to a midweek, like a first Wednesday service that had they were talking about marriage, like how to stay married. And it was so ironic and so perfect that the Lord had set that up. The Lord has done amazing things just in the last, let's see. So my family had another reunion in the same place in Kerala. And just right before that time, he started sleeping in our room and has become an entirely different man than I have ever known him to be. Like, he did not have, like, emotional literacy whatsoever with, like, a woman. And I think part of that did come from, like, the group and the way his dad trained him. And like, there was a lot of like male dominance, much less like, not as much teaching men how to love their wives. It was more like teaching women how to submit to their husbands. It was very one sided. And so he has had to kind of start from scratch and like branch out and find relationships. And the Lord has been so faithful to change everything about both of us, really. And one of the best things I would say that I've learned through her pregnancy and the postpartum period was just to know that even if, if father and mother forsake me, or if even if my husband isn't there, like I know I have an advocate. I know that I have security, stability, safety, something like he is the rock and fortress and deliverer. And but there are things that I had to learn for, whatever the Lord has for us to do next, being trained by the Holy Spirit to respond differently to conflict, to respond differently to my emotions, and to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the only thing that is going to bring me through a pregnancy feeling isolated, alone, abandoned, like rejected, like by so many people in a row, the only thing is going to be by the grace of God.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that this had a happy ending. When you first started telling your stories, I obviously didn't foresee the issues in your relationships coming up because, I was just like, oh, they've got 7 kids. The marriage must be great. Like, and so when you started sharing that, I was like, oh no. And then when it wasn't better right away, I was like, how is this ending? Where are we now? Is he still there? Like, and so
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that the Lord has been clearly working like in your marriage and that I assume he's sleeping back in the bedroom again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he put on his ring, and we actually went out on a date for the first time in years and years on my birthday, which was last Saturday. So
Wow.
it has been amazing just to see him. I feel like he just needed to pull himself completely out of like our normal patterns. And I had to learn to just trust that the Lord was going to teach him the way he needed to lead our family.
Yeah.
Because like in all of my trying so hard to get fellowship and get what I needed from Drew in my way, like it was all failing, and it all fell apart. And um just to know how to stand back and just watch the Lord work, just like you would in labor. Just stand back and let the Lord work and trust that he's got it, even if you don't see it, even if you don't understand it, like he is still working.
Yeah.
That is like, it's not like I did anything to make Drew come back into a relationship with the Lord, because he felt very far from the Lord. I was just like, okay, is he saved? Like, I don't know what we're doing here. And what is this going to do to our children if he does go? There was just so much to war with, especially being vulnerable and pregnant, and like the self pity that you can have when you're like, I'm supposed to be cared for and protected, and like I'm not.
Yeah.
It felt very, very vulnerable, and just it grew a whole other level of trust that the Lord is who he says he is, and he does not abandon his children.
Yeah.
And he's close to the brokenhearted. Like I could say so many scriptures in a row that just like that carried me through day after day of just isolation and just yeah, feeling pretty much abandoned.
Hmm.
So, but I'm so thankful. And
Right. I'm thankful too, and thankful that you guys seem to have found a new church and are starting to establish, a new community. Thank you, Karyn. Thank you for coming on here and sharing all of this. This has been really special and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's hard with 7 kids at home. Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for letting me share my stories and inviting me on. And I just I feel so much even more passionately now that every mother knows. Like I even see it in Christian groups, birth groups, just that how if you your husband needs to get in, behind you, and your husband needs to do this. And I'm just like, you just can't force things like that. And the Lord alone is your stability. He really is. And if you think that it's somebody else, you're setting yourself up.
Right.
Because people do what they're going to do. They may or may not listen to the Lord. and we have to build our own relationship with him, because that's where the confidence, whether it's free birth or anything else in life, that's where that confidence comes from, is knowing that he does love us and is present with us.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting the follow button. Also, we'd love for you to leave a written review of the show so that more people's births and lives can be changed by the love of Jesus and the empowerment of accurate birth education. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot of it and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to fill out your interest form. Also, if you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.
Like, it was like she wasn't even there. It was, oh gosh, she spit up.
Spit up.
Um,